10 minutes to transform your life, and I got to tell you, the material that we cover here is a lifesaver for me because, I work so intensely in the cycles of news and stuff. It's kind of I think for some people that have a job, if they're working like in the police department and they're always dealing with crime, I feel like I'm always dealing with crime when I'm doing news because there's so much that is just, bad. And then I think, well, I have to have, as a Christian, I have to also be able to see what's the redemptive mission that I'm on. How is this fulfilling the destiny of preaching the kingdom of God? And to do that, I have to shift my perspective. And part of that is I have to realize that Christians have always been alive during times of tumultuous history. If you were in Jerusalem at the time of the sacking of Jerusalem, 70 AD, you were doing your ministry apostolically and you're watching the political trend. Rome's on its way. This nation's about to get taken apart. It didn't stop you from doing what you were called to do. And that's all the reason why this level 10 material is so important. Because we talk about being unstoppable. We talk about understanding the convergence process. That is, going into the call of God in your life, regardless of what's going on around you, you've got the ultimate power to author your own story. And if you surrender that process to circumstances or to other people, well, you're not writing your story anymore. The world's writing your story. So unlocking your story is where my son Carl and I are going to go right now. And he works with coaching and mentoring. He works with the product development and with the research. And I'm so glad that I've got a son that is really into this because personal development is it's the business of becoming who God called you to be. And truth be told, our business in ministry is to unlock you to become the epic that God intended you to be, to write every chapter He wanted you to write, and to leave nothing out. So, Carl, let's start with this idea that when God introduces Himself to the children of Israel, He says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He starts with a story. He positions Himself as the God who is working in the journey of Abraham. And Abraham starts as a pagan wanderer who becomes the first Jew, the first Hebrew, who becomes the friend of God and literally the patriarch of Israel. Then Isaac comes along, who's his son, and he grows up and has to carry on that mantle, and he literally volunteers to be a sacrifice, if necessary, to fulfill that faith that his father has been called to walk in. And then Jacob comes along, who's a great story, because he starts off as Jacob and goes through a name change, becomes Israel. God changes your name, which means He changes the character you play in your own story. And I know some people that actually hear God tell them to change their name, and Paul Young-E Cho was one of them. I don't think his name was Paul. It was something else, but the Lord told him, now your name is Paul.
Saul, maybe? No, I'm just kidding.
No. Yes, well, there you go. Saul of Tarsus. Jesus meets him. He says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? But then He gives him a name change. A name change means the story changes. And it's interesting that in the book of Revelation, one of the promises is that God has a new name written down in heaven for those that overcome. Overcome what? Overcome their own story and enter into His story, which is why we were talking earlier, our original product was, what was it? Unlocking
your history.
Your history, because it's really His story in your history. So let's talk about the reality is that we all define our life in a certain way, Carl. We see it, and we have to be really careful, in a sense, what narrative we create to describe who we are and why we are the way we are, because I think we tend to try to find meaning just to make sense of life, but it isn't always accurate, is it? It isn't always the real story of who you really are. Mm-hmm. Or what you're really called to be.
Well, more often than not, it's been my experience that people don't find meaning, they assign meaning.
Ooh.
And so instead of actually trying to dive into their own story and find the gold in them, their hills, as you like to say, they're going to assign a meaning to it instead of actually really finding it for themselves and sifting through their own story. And more often than not, a lot of those people do have a narrative that they're spinning, or a monologue that they're spinning inside of their mind that's going to reinforce whatever they're finding, whatever the meaning they're assigning to those significant emotional events in their lives.
And so, when you say to yourself, well, these things always happen to me, this is the stuff that always takes place, this is the story of my life.
Why even bother?
Right. Many times, those are actually belief systems that you're living with, and in a sense, you're collecting data and evidence to reinforce that trajectory, not realizing the great power you've got is you get to rewrite your own story. One of our friends, Brian Clemmer, used to have an illustration of these big glasses he'd wear, and I saw my sunglasses, so I grabbed them, put them on, and he said, most people are living a life where they're seeing life through a perspective that is their belief system. He said they never bother to realize that their belief system is coloring everything they see.
Yep.
So that if your belief system is programmed a certain way, everything to me looks blue. So the whole world is thinking blue, whether I like it or not. And what Clemmer would say is the art of awareness. Talk about great awakening. Here's an awakening. Is you take off the lenses and examine what are my belief systems? What am I actually what am I agreeing with about my life? What did I believe about God, about me, about destiny, about my power to change or to influence my circumstances? The moment you take the glasses off and examine your belief system, you can change the way you see things so that when you put them back on, you actually can see things differently. But you've got to mess with the belief system.
Yeah.
Which is what a believer actually is supposed to do. Change the beliefs. So where would you like to start? Because we have the personal destiny map.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One thing I do want to interject there is that it's not always necessarily just things in the negative, right? Like if you view the world through rose-colored glasses, sometimes the red flags just look like flags. So it really is important to be able to monitor the lenses that we're interpreting the world through. There's another great saying, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. So if we are aware of what our perspective is or what our lens is that we're viewing the world through, then we're far better off than just somebody who's going through life willy-nilly, unaware of the fact that they have this confirmation bias that they're sifting all of their experiences through.
That is so true. And I was just listening to a podcast last night. I have to go back and listen to it again. The guy that doesn't believe in God, but I found even some of these cats have some interesting statements to make. And then later on, they maybe find faith, and they still go by their research. And it's Sam Harris. And so Sam Harris's whole thing is about cognitive processes and how we do create a bias. And he talks about change. It's very hard to change, which is why you can become a little cynical about transformation because most people really don't change. But the fact is, there's a reason why some people do. And so we want to take a look at that right now. I don't know if we'll get a chance to go to this board. I got 2 minutes.
Sorry.
No. Should I go over there and just do a real quick? Let's do an analysis or something.
Do a quick one. And while you're walking over there, I just want to say, I think I was in a doctor's office, and this very nice older lady was talking to me about change, oddly enough. And she gave me this quip, or this quote, that nothing is as constant as change. And I was maybe 13 or 14 at the time, and that quote just stuck with me forever because it's so true. There is nothing as constant as change in the world. Nothing, at least in our tangible reality.
And for a believer too, because you might say that you want to have more stability. Well, God will be the force that disrupts your stability. Take a look at the life of Joseph. And I've done this for many years, and it's always been surprising. Joseph starts off with favor from his father, but that favor causes his brothers to be jealous and to throw him into a pit. Out of the pit, however, of despair, he gets delivered. The problem is he gets delivered by a divine appointment where people pull him out and they send him into slavery in Egypt. And now his brothers have sold him as a slave. While he's in Egypt, he's working in the fields, but he ends up becoming promoted to being the head of all of the laborers for somebody named Potiphar. And this guy is a high-ranking political official, but his wife is so attracted to Joseph, she tries to have a sexual affair with him. He refuses to do so, goes to prison. And when he's in prison, he ends up interpreting the dream of the butler of the Pharaoh. And in that dream, he is accurate and put in this guy's mind, but he's forgotten for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, Pharaoh has a dream, and Joseph comes out of the pit. But I want you to see the ups and downs here, because what happened at the end is Joseph then had completed a life preparation process, and now he is ready for what the Bible calls the crown of life. He was given a certain authority because he had overcome the journey. What you believe about your life should never be settled because of your low experiences. As you can see, it's God's work to take you through the highs and lows to shape you into an overcomer. When we come back in the next Take 10, we'll look at how that process works. I did a study of gold medal performance once, and that was the attributes of peak performers in a variety of professions. And I wanted to find a connection to the Bible, and boy, did I find it. I found this whole world around this world convergence, and I put it together in a series which is really called Gold Medal Performance. But then I did a Bible study, which was kind of a synopsis of a lot of the training, and I put it together for you as a free gift. And this was done for my students at that time, people I wanted to really reach out to. You want to get the Gold Medal Performance Bible Study material, all you got to do is go to lancewallnau.com/gold study. That's lancewallnau.com/gold study. Trust me, this is the distillation of about a decade of observation and meditation on characteristics of peak performance and supernatural instruction in the Bible about how to arrive at convergence in your own life. You don't want to miss it. It's just the best stuff I've got out there.